Hello everyone, welcome back. This is 2-P 5x5 Piston Door Guide in the Compact Redstone series. I'm MU2022, and as the title suggests, today I'm going to talk about how you can make an original sort of 5x5. And yeah, unlike tutorials out there, here I'm not going to basically give you an entire build for you. Instead, this video is for those of you who want to try out yourself in creating your own 5x5. So, yeah, so this is more of a guide rather than a tutorial video. So just know the difference. And unlike the 3x3 piston door guide 1-P that I've created before, which I actually showed you an entire a working design, in here I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to give you some important pointers. So for example, the creation of piston layout, power layout, determination of input position, sequences, and some wiring tips and tricks. Yep. So I'm just going to give you these instead of giving you a completed build. So yeah. So that's that. And let's get started, I guess. And so a brief introduction. So yeah, so basically a 5x5 piston door is well seen as a huge milestone to many because the door center block is very hard to handle basically because the center block implies the door must have at least a triple piston extender to function, and due to the other blocks basically surrounding it, many struggle to move the blocks out from the door space. So yeah, so this video is just here to guide you through how you can solve these major issues that people often face, and and also just to guide you through how to make an original and compact 5x5 using concepts that I've taught in the intermediate and I guess also introductory course series. So yeah, so of course we have to get started somewhere, and the place we start, of course, for any piston doors is the creation of piston layout. And yeah, this is a major part where people get stuck. Of course there are many different ways of creating it, but then unfortunately, it's quite hard for one to create a compact, and yeah, basically it's very hard for one to create a compact 5x5 piston layout without any pointers. So it's very likely that if you attempt by yourself, that you are going to overcomplicate things or just have a layout that's very hard to wire. So here I'm just going to give you a major pointer here. So I'll just guide you through what a standard solution would look like. So for 5x5, we can use the grouping concepts that we have introduced in 2-11 methods of compacting. Now, but then how to group is another key question, of course. So here we can create 3 groups. So the first group and the second group is basically just the side pistons. And then the third group would be the entire center layer. Now we group it like this because it's much more easier for us to use the top and bottom as with some large extenders, and then just to control it all together, because these 3 layers will have exactly this same properties basically. So it's a lot more easier than to handle, to control, than having some discrete extenders. For example, one might think that let's just use the standard 1.05 second 5x5 layouts. It has a grouping somewhat like this. So if you are going to do, for example, a triple for the top, and then do double with quad storage for the bottom and then do some double extenders for the sides, you basically complicate things quite a lot more. The reason being, of course, you have a triple to handle, you have a double to handle at the bottom with, you know, a lot of storage, and you also have some double extenders and sides to handle. So this is also a standard solution, but then we are aiming for compactness, not for speed, so we're not going to do that. And then there are, of course, some really bad solutions than this, in terms of compactness at least. And yeah, just basically, it's very hard for starters to think of how you can group the blocks, and this is one of the more standard ways to group blocks, basically. So this is what the majority of compact 5x5 piston doors, basically. Of course, there's some small variations, but overall it's going to be this basically the same. So yeah, we can basically dump the sides because they're going to be very easily controlled by single piston extenders, and we can just simply concentrate on the 15 blocks at the center. Now we have 15 blocks here, but then for the top and the bottom, we only really have 10 blocks for the door frame. So this entails a very key thing, which is we have to do storage. So just apply the storage concept that you've learned from 1-12. And yeah, by now you should be quite familiar with the concept of storage already. So yeah, it shouldn't be that hard for you to figure out how to do storage. So yeah. So storage is required, and for now, we can actually just ignore these 4 corner blocks. They're not really that important until I instruct you later, let's say. Because we are trying to group things, and we really want all these 3 layers to be controlled by exactly the same extender. So we are not going to rely on these things, because this means that we are going to do some separations or discreting, basically. And that's not what we want for now. We still want to apply the grouping concept as much as we can, because if we have the 3 layers having the exact same properties, then we can just have one general circuit that can control all the 3 layers together, and that will be a great advantage for us in creating at least a decently compact 5x5 piston door. So yeah. So hopefully you would get the current aim on creating the piston layout, which is you know, just have all the middle 3 layers to be this control exactly the same by the same extenders, just copy 3 times. So yeah. And now next thing, of course, is, yes, we discussed that we want to group the 3 middle layers together, but then how do we develop an actual solution to this? Now we can think simple first. I will just demonstrate one layer by one layer. So if you remember something, which is hipster doors. So hipster doors are basically doors that only rely on one side of the door, and then it retracts all the door blocks upwards. And of course, we can do hipster doors for the middle 3 layers by doing something like this. So we are going to leave a gap here, and then we do a triple piston extender. So this will control 2 blocks, and you can confirm that triple piston extender indeed can grab this block here. And similarly for the top, we are going to do, for example, a quadruple piston extender here. Again, we have a gap to make sure that we can have the storage be able to be placed, because we cannot obviously place on the ceiling. So yeah, so this would be a valid solution on how to retract the blocks. So again, of course, you can always verify that the quadruple piston extender is able to grab this block. And yeah, and we can see that if we use a hipster door approach, we will have the top grabbing 3 blocks while the bottom grabs 2 blocks. So yeah. But then of course, we can actually do better than that, because it will turn out that using this kind of layout is very troublesome. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. It does work, but then it's not the standard layout, and it can get into some complications basically. So rather than having a 3:2 storage, what we want to do is to actually swap it. So we don't want a 3:2 storage ratio. Instead, we want a 2:3 storage ratio. And explaining this now is a bit more complicated, so I'll just skip the explanation for now. But then when the time occurs to be suitable, then I will just explain to you why it is much better to have a 2:3 ratio like this. And of course, it might be confusing for one now, because now we basically destroyed our hipster door approach. But then you can try to test it out and see indeed this is still a valid piston layout for the middle layers. So yeah, I'll just leave that to you. And basically by applying this layer 3 times, then we can finally develop our full piston layout, which we basically copy the middle layer 3 times. So the top would look something like this. The bottom will look something like this. And then of course we still need the side pistons, which are just simple single extenders, and it's exactly the same for both the left and the right. There you go. So yeah, so this is a standard layout for a 5x5 piston door, and yep, we can work on with that already. Now I'll give you some side notes, I guess. Of course, if you have watched 2-11 methods of compacting, you would see that we can actually apply the folding concept to the top extender, such that we basically fold the quad into something like this. And this can shave at most 2 layers, although in most of the cases it only shaves 1 layer, because at the top end these here needs powering. So yeah, but either way, you can shave it like that, but we are not going to discuss it in this video. So I'll just revert it back to the complete quad instead of the folded quad. Now, of course, we can end here and call it a day, but then in recent years, there is some major developments in 5x5s that in the concepts that we are going to compact the top and the bottom layouts even more. Now, let me just show you in this module here. So we still have the same side pistons, but then what we would do instead is that we will start to dismantle the fold concept slightly, mainly on the storage. And recall that previously we tried to ignore the presence of the corner blocks, but then now we acknowledge that these blocks can help us to compact our layouts even more, in the sense that we are going to use these blocks as door blocks now. So for the top, we still want to retain the 2:3 storage ratio, and it will look like this. And because also the fact that we are now having door blocks at this layer stored at this layer instead of a layer above, this also means that our extender can reduce by 1 in length and also move down by 1. This means that we actually successfully compacted 2 layers downwards already. Now for the bottom, a very similar story. We would rely on these blocks and then just add more storage when necessary. And the way we add the storage is very similar. So it goes like this. And then for this side, we need 6 blocks basically. And then adding these, we have 9. And the 6 blocks, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 here, and then we need 3 more blocks. So the way we do it is via like a zigzag approach. And then 7, 8, 9. So we have the storage complete. And then because again, we have the storage level 1 above already instead of here. So our extender can be moved 1 block upwards, and it also can reduce by 1 length. So we only need a double extender here, like so. And that is the new standard layouts that people often use for even more compact standard 5x5 piston doors. And using this layout, you can get it to basically 3 wide or 2 wide even. But then mostly it's on 3 wide and 4 wide designs where you would use this layout. 2 wide is possible, but I'm not going to discuss it in here. If you're interested, I also give you an exercise basically on how to start up your 2 wide journey, I guess. But yeah, it's too complicated to explain it in this video, so I'll just leave it out. But yeah, so for this layout is mainly for 3 wide to 4 wide, and this layout is mainly for 4 wide to 5 wide. Of course, you can go even wider, but then we are concerned on compactness, so we are not going to go wider, I guess, at best, you know. So yeah, and also another thing is that you might notice that the storage here and here is asymmetrical. So in case if you really want to flip it, feel free to do that. I'll just stick on with this layout. But then if it appears to be necessary, yeah, just feel free to flip any of the sides here, here versus here, here if you need it. And because we have 2 layouts here, so I need to explain them separately. So I'll refer this as the first pathway, this is the second pathway, and I'll explain the first one and then the second one. So in the description, there are timestamps where you can just basically just skip to whatever pathway you're interested in. However, if you're just starting out, I strongly recommend you first understand the fundamentals and do the first pathway first before you go on to the more challenging second pathway. So yeah, basically that. So now I'm going to explain on the first pathway. So let's start off by doing some planning. So we want to plan how our door operates, basically. Okay, so now recall that we actually developed this layout via a hipster door approach, but then of course, now we have a 2 to 3 storage ratio, so it doesn't really quite work. And in addition, if in case we really still want to wire our door like a hipster door, then we will actually see some problems. So let's just see how a hipster door approach wiring would look like in animation first. So let's suppose the closing, it will do something like this. And then the bottom closing, it will do something like this. Closing isn't that important because it just has to push the blocks upwards like this. We are more concerned on the opening, basically. So if we really are trying to go for a hipster door approach, then what would we do? We would, for the top, for example, we would do a double extender, then pull it back. Same for the bottom, we would do, you know, for example, a double extender, and then pull the storage back. And then now here, of course, we have modified the layout a little bit, so it's not going to be entirely in hipster door. But then what we notice is that, yes, although we only need a triple for this block to be retracted, but then the bottom is out of reach for this block and it needs to grab this block. So what we do for the top is that we do a full quad. Like so, and then just do a triple retraction is good enough. And then now for the quad, we can do, you know, a double extender, and then now a triple piston extender. So this is why I call quote-unquote hipster door approach. And yep, yes, that's fine. That's a valid sequence. But then, of course, for those of you that know why this is bad, well, of course it's bad because we don't really see much places where we can reuse stuff. And in addition, so basically you already see we need a double extender for the first block and then a quad extender for the second block, and then for the top. And while for the bottom we need a double extender twice for the first and second blocks, and then we need a triple piston extender for the third block. And this is not nice because we basically need to do different types of extenders, and different type of extenders, of course, they're going to require different circuits, and that's not what we want. So we want to make sure that our circuits are reusable, our sequence is reusable, and we can maximize our circuit efficiency. So yeah, now after viewing the very bad hipster door approach, we can finally check out some better approaches. And let me just give you an interesting thought. So instead of, you know, like previously we have the top doing a double piston extender before doing a quad, but then it would be interesting if we actually don't do the double. Instead, we do the entire quad here first, because we can. And now, of course, this block will go back, and then the bottom will do its own thing. And of course, here the bottom will do actually a triple now, because this block is now out of reach for the top. And then now the top does another quad again. So yeah, so that is valid. It is possible. And we already see some advantages basically, because now we just need to wire one quad instead of needing a double before a quad for the top. And then for the bottom, it has basically much less moves. We don't need a double extender, we only need a triple extender basically. And then the rest of the moves are pretty easy to wire. But then, yes, we have a plan now, but then how do we do it is the question. So let's just notice some things about the top first. So if we want to do the quad right at the start of the opening, it would be best for us to do, you know, the storage here, and then we push the top two pistons during the closing. And that way the top is ready for the quad, basically. And let's just call this storage here firing, and then the top two pistons firing as a set of moves capital A. So yeah. Okay, so after A, and then the closing ends. Basically, the closing only needs to do A. And then now for the opening, well, we need the quad extension, of course. And then, of course, the quad will also retract as it needs to. And then it will retract to here. Now, for the first quad, we actually want a 4-block retraction, because we want to store the block. So this extra retraction, we call it as extra moves basically. And also the quad, I will name it as a capital B. Okay, so after B and then, the extra moves, which is this piston here, we can do A actually. A, what does A do? A does this, and then top two pistons, right? So, it does basically the beginning of the quad. And then we can do B again, which is basically just the remaining of the quad. And this time we don't do the extra moves, so we will leave the blocks here as it should be. So yeah, so that is a very nice sequence for the top, basically. And I will let me first copy the layout to the designated spots first, and then I will write down the sequence for you. So give me a second. There you go. So by naming the set of moves, A, B, and then the extra moves as EM, capital letters, all of them, and we can basically have our top quote unquote sequence, because we haven't actually have the inputs yet, be something like this. So the closing would be A, and then the opening would be B, and then we do the extra moves, and then we do A, and then we do B at last. So we can really see the advantage of doing this now is that instead of the double extender and the quad extender that we use during the Piston Door approach, we only need to control basically A, B, and then just another EM basically. So we only have 3 sets of moves to control, which is very nice. Unlike the double and quad extender, which the double extender is basically redundant, and we shouldn't even include that. So yeah. So that's how we plan to operate our door. And then we'll come back to the sequence a bit later with help from, this quote unquote sequence that we have developed. So now we would think about the bottom. For the bottom, there are basically 2 scenarios again. One is the closing, one is the opening. I will start with the opening first. So the opening, what happens is that the top will push down the blocks, and then the 3 door blocks that the bottom has to receive are these 3 blocks. Now, what do we do? It's quite natural that, of course, we want to do the storage. We cannot push the piston stack because it will just push back up. So that's not nice. So of course we do storage. So we do the first storage. I call this first storage. This is the second storage. And then here, we are trying to store blocks now. So of course we'll do the second storage, and we can also do the top piston here. And then we'll do the first storage again. And here comes the part where we need the triple, because the top needs to grab this block, but it's now currently out of reach. So what we do is basically just a triple here. So triple extension, and of course we need to do the triple retraction as well, like so. So that's basically what we are going to do. And also, let me just give you some notations. So for this set of moves, so the first storage, second storage, and top piston, and then the first storage. So these sets of these moves, I group them together and call it capital C. So yeah. And then the triple extension is just triple extension, triple retraction is just triple retraction. So yeah. And now we have the opening basically planned. Now let's consider closing. Well, it would be nice, of course, if we can reuse some moves. And let's just consider C, because C is the first thing that is powered during the opening. So naturally, if the closing C also works, then it will be very nice. And let's just see. So we have the first storage, of course. And then we will have second storage and the top piston. And then we also have the third storage again, like so. And indeed, these are the moves that C provides, and it's exactly what we want. So all we need to do now is just a triple extension. And of course, here we probably don't want to extend this piston here. So yeah, so basically that's just a note. And yep, and we don't want a triple retraction definitely, because the triple retraction would basically make a gap here, which we don't want. So all we really want is just a triple extension like so. And then we can just call it a day. So at the end, what this entails is that the bottom will have this door operation sequence, as the closing would be C, and then triple extension, I just call it TE. Opening is very similar. We have C again, we have TE again, and then we have triple retraction, which is TR. And from here, again, we can really clearly see that we only need a toggle for the triple retraction. And then C and TR can basically just group together, and they will always power no matter the closing or the opening. So, yeah. Now, actually, there are also other sequences, of course, for both top and bottom, but I'm just going to introduce these two very standard ones for you. So yeah, I'm not going to discuss the remaining ones because that can be confusing for ordinary viewers. So yeah, so there we go. So we basically developed our door operation planning. So let's just go back to one of the questions that I have not answered yet. So why do we do, instead of a 3:2 ratio, we do a 2:3 ratio? Now there are basically two main reasons to do this. So the first reason is that notice how the top does, basically A, B twice. So closing does A and then just cuts off, prevents B from powering until you do the opening. And then here we also have another A, B right here. So basically the top does A, B twice. Or you can also say the top does B twice. And what B really means is that it basically does two quads. And if we do two quads, well, we basically want to store two blocks, let's just say. Yeah, basically two quads correspond to two blocks stored. And another argument is that the top usually requires more space. This should be quite trivial because top is a quad, bottom is a triple. So quad naturally has more moves to control than the bottom. So we naturally want to give top a bit more space. And the best way to do it is to have the top having less storage than the bottom. And this actually is a pretty common phenomenon for large piston doors where we want to minimize storage for the top and just give the storage to the bottom. Yeah, it's just basically that. And you can pretty much see in many large doors, and some can even go as insane as only one storage for the top and then the other is just all by the bottom. And this is perfectly fine, actually. But then here, we are just going to do the 2:3 storage ratio. So yeah, and in the documents, I actually included 2 video links for you to demonstrate on the animations of the top and bottom for both closing and the opening. But I'm not going to show that here. You can just view the videos by yourself. So yeah, now I'm just going to go on and talk about the powering layouts for the first pathway. So, after configuring the piston layout, we should think of how we can power the pistons via different power lines. So again, we just consider one by one first. So let's consider the top first. The main thing we need to figure out is how to power the pistons here. Of course, we can have some very silly solutions, like really extending an observer downwards to here. But then we are in Java Edition. We have QC. Of course, we want to use QC when it benefits us. And of course, Redstone dust would be our best solution here. The Redstone dust would power through the solid block and then diagonally power these by QC. And also, another thing is that notice that this dust line basically controls 2 layers. One is the layer here, one is the layer here. So if you see my points, you would instantly know that we can apply the same concept 2 more times on top, which means 2 more dust lines here and here. So this dust line will control these 2 layers. This dust line will control these 2 layers. So that's nice. And then all we are left with is the top layer of pistons, which we can basically do it very simply by a row of repeaters with dust. Of course, you can do observers instead of repeaters, but I'll just do repeaters here. And yeah, so that's basically our powering layouts, but then there's a caveat, which is that there's nothing to update these pistons, unfortunately. Then after this, there's also nothing to update the pistons at this level. So for this kind of powering layouts where we are relying on dust lines, we basically need to extend them by 1, and then we would do some updated pistons on the side here just to update any diagonally powered pistons. And that completes our powering layouts for the top already. Just adding updated pistons will do the job. And before I move on to the bottom, let me just add some extra notes. That instead of these 2 being dust lines, of course, we can also make use of observers and have a powering layouts like this. This also works, but I'm not going to use that in this video. But if you want to use it, you can do that. So yeah. So you see that I will give you many alternatives on how to do things, and you can choose to follow it or not. But then, yeah, I will just move on with one of the ways of doing it, and then you can try to apply the concepts by yourself to the other powering layouts if you wish to use them. And then now we have considered the powering layouts for the top. Now we can consider the bottom. There are actually many ways to do the piston stack and the storage. So we look at the storage first. Now we want, very naturally, we want to connect all the first storage together and all the second storage pistons together, right? And as a backstory, during the pre-observer era, so basically the time where observers weren't a thing yet, before 1.11, the storage pistons are basically connected by dust lines and repeaters. But then, of course, now we have observers. It basically allows us to compacts things a bit further, because previously we would occupy this layer as well, but then now with observers we can reduce the layer. So a standard solution with some modifications due to the presence of observers would be, a dust line here. It will connect these two, but then we are left out with this. So what we want to do is to have a repeater here, dust here, go back down, and then now we'll use observers here. We do this, a dust here. This dust will control these two, but then we are left out with this one now. So what we do instead is to make this a node block, observer here, and then a block dust and a block here. And then here, because the second storage will also come with the first storage afterwards, so we just wire it to the first storage as well. And then by powering it, you'll see that it works. So yeah, so that's nice. Although it's not in sync, but then it doesn't really matter that much. As long as you have correct timings for this here, it's fine. It doesn't have to be in sync. So yep, so this is a standard solution, but then this is not the solution that I'm going to cover with you today. But either way, so let's just also take some small notes on this here. Now, the thing I want to take note is this here. I use a rising edge monostable circuit here instead of a falling edge, because if you use a falling edge, there are some scenarios where this won't work properly. That scenario being if you have a sequence that powers the middle pistons by pushing the storage blocks into here and having a dust here to power the middle piston. Now with a rising edge, this will work perfectly fine. You just do this. But with a falling edge, so falling edge would be something like this. Yeah, you will see that the second storage will actually mess up the entire door and make it not work. So unfortunately, we don't want to do a falling edge here. We want to do a rising edge instead. So that's why you have to extend this dust downwards and do this. So yeah, so that's just in case if you need to rely on the storage and this dust here to fire here. But then I will discuss with you the solutions where we don't have to do that. But then just giving you some background here. So yeah, as I've already mentioned, I call this the standard method or the pre-observer method. So the introduction of observers basically allows us to do something even better than this. You don't have to do, this kind of wiring, basically. So the introduction of observers, of course, makes some other options possible, and including the use of observer sliders. So let me just give you a common approach. The common approach is actually to use two sliders, like this, and make them zero tick. So how to make them zero tick? So you have this here, we want to place a block here, and then we want to have an updated piston such that when this observer arrives and powers through the block and then powers this updated piston, which will update this piston and then creates a zero tick, because this observer will be pushed basically at the same tick backwards, but then you already emitted zero tick pulse with these three, which is reliable. And then basically a similar story for this slide as well. You have this go here, and then we'll have this as the updated piston now by wiring it like this. So yeah, so that's a way of doing it. And besides this double slider method, we can also have a single slider method, which is to do just this. So instead of a second slider down here, we just have 2 node blocks plus here. It also works quite nicely. So yeah, I will stick with the double slider method basically. But then it's up to you to choose which one you want to. It doesn't really matter that much in this case. And before I move on to give you more choices of powering layouts, let me just give you some notes on this particular layout. Now for capital C, so this here, we want to do first, second, first, right? So the way we do it is actually a bit limited because we need a special timing in order to make it work. That being making these two sliders be different only by either a 1 tick or a 2 tick. If you use game ticks, it will be either 2 game ticks or 4 game ticks. So you see this works. This works. And then if you are in case wanting a 2 tick or 4 game tick delay between the two sliders, you know, it can be something like this, for example. Then we'll do this, and opening also works. So yeah. And of course you can try to use other delay, but then you will see that it doesn't really work. And the main reason being this slider also will get detected by the slider, and the time is just incorrect. That basically fails the storage. So yeah, that's why 1 tick or 2 tick. Using game tick, it will be 2 game ticks or 4 game ticks. This difference is important. Now you might ask, which one should I use then? I would prefer you to use the 2 tick or 4 game tick delay. So basically this design. The reason it should be quite intuitive is because you have 2 ticks of delay between this and this, which also means more delay between the first of this and the second of this. So this means that you have more leeway for your top piston to fire. So yeah, so that's that. And then before I move on to the bottom piston stack, let me also just share with you the very traditional method, which is actually the observerless method, which looks very much like a checkerboard. Like so. So yeah. And the toggle being this here. And of course you need a 1 tick to enter it, otherwise this won't act as a toggle normally. So yeah. So after discussing many of the combinations or possible ways of doing storage, now let's talk about the many ways of doing this bottom piston stack, which in terms of the powering layout, this is the part where most people get stuck. Now, in the pre-observer era, so the time where observers don't exist yet, it's very common to add a layer here because we really rely on this dust here, and then no matter what you do, is just can't really wire these, so it most likely will be something like this. But then now we have observers, so obviously we can do something better. But then before we really start to consider the powering layers, we should really consider what it needs to do first. So of course it needs to do the triple, right? So the top pistons are going to be at this level for the triple to fire. So the problem is, how do you control these pistons? Now, the pre-observer era is really only one way. That is to have 3 power points, or 3 powering locations, I say, here, and then push the storage here, and then all of these powering locations will power these 3 pistons separately. But then we don't need to do that now. What we can do instead, there are 2 ways. The first way is to power via the floor level, so just have these solid blocks. Then, just fire these. So, very nice. So that's the first way. The second way, we will adopt a way similar to, just pushing the storage pistons for, and so these blocks have to be solid, and then instead we have an observer slider here, and then we have the storage pistons push the blocks here, and then we will fire via the storage pistons. So that also works. So this gives us 2 ways of doing things, essentially. Now, in this video, I'm going to focus on the way that the observers are facing upwards. So yeah. Now, by doing this, you might have a concern, is that what about the pistons at here? Well, again, it's very similar to the power lines here. It's actually possible to fire these via the QC here, basically. Of course, we would need to have some very specific solutions, which is why I'm here to help. But yeah, just saying to you that it is possible that this can work. So you don't have to be strictly on the horizontal facing observers. Okay, so we don't have to worry about this position, at least. What we need to think about is these recent positions. Now, remember, C needs to fire these top pistons at this level. It, of course, might be natural for you to think of a solution like this, which it can work, to be honest, and in this location it does work. But unfortunately, this is locational, because this dust here will pulse either this piston or this piston, depending on the location. So we don't want a locational build, so we will scrap this idea. Another solution would be having another observer slider like this, and then now, this would work. Yeah, obviously, but then it's not that great. I'm not saying that it cannot work, but then you basically also forces this bottom layer to be powered by another slider at this position here, which isn't so nice actually. And we have more clever solutions. So what would be a clever solution is to have another slider, yes, but then the slider is at this position and facing into the piston stack. So overall, it would be something like this. Like so. So yeah, and notice that I placed these two solid blocks because they are necessary. And the benefit of this powering layout is that now we can have a power line just for the bottom pistons here. And of course, these observers can be responsible for these two layers, so don't worry about that. So yeah, so we end up with this powering layout. Now, of course, if you're just starting out, you would definitely not know how to power these this exact powering layouts, which of course, that's also the reason why I'm here. I will teach you on the specific methods to power this powering layout, so don't worry about that. So yeah, now again, I'll give you some other powering layouts if you wish not to use these. So another powering layout, involving the horizontally facing observers, like here. Would be something like this. Now, of course, you're free to put this at the back if you really want to, although I'm not sure why. But anyway, so this is another possible powering layout, basically. This is not locational because this thus is only responsible for either this position or this position. And this thus won't be responsible for this position because the slider would be responsible for this position. So yeah, so no worries about that. This is not locational as long as you power it correctly. So this is one solution for the horizontally facing observer slider. Another solution is to be entirely observerless. And if you want to be entirely observerless, it would look something like this. This is a comparator for a reason, because repeater going to this dust won't be absorbed by the comparator to power this dust. But then what would power the comparator would be a comparator 1 tick or 2 game tick input and any pulse length greater than 1 tick or 2 game tick. Which would be useful for observerless layouts. Actually, I don't have to remove it yet for now, because there's another one much similar to this here, which is we have this still, but then now because we have observers, so you can just add an observer slide at the back. So this also works, but then I'm not sure why you have to do this to yourself. But if you really want to, there's one way of doing it. Not saying it's good. It's not that good actually. But yeah, it's still possible if you really want to wire it like this. So yeah. So these are the possible powering layouts that I'm going to discuss with you. Obviously, I'm not going to discuss all of them. In fact, I'm just going to discuss one, which is this one, as I've already said. But yeah, in case if you want to use your own powering layout, just a few suggestions for you. Okay. Let me also do this, I guess. Although it doesn't really matter, I think, later. Like so. Okay, so now that we have developed our powering layouts, we can think of the inputs, I guess. We don't necessarily have to think it right now, but then, why not? So, of course, the position of the inputs is very important because where you place it determines how the circuits are placed and powered. And yeah, this is also the reason why experienced Redstoneers would determine the input position a bit later during the early stages of building process. In extreme cases, of course, the input can be decided only at the end, but then most likely during early stages you would decide it already. Now, for Piston Doors, input is determined quite easily because there will most likely be some apparent locations where if you don't place the input there, you're going to have a hard time because either accessibility issues or just the pattern really encourages you to place it in a certain position for instantaneous access. But then for standard doors, it's not really that the case. We have to plan basically quite carefully instead. Because there are no longer any patterned piston layouts. They're all just grouped together and you have to think of where to place it best. Now, if we look back at our sequence, so during the opening, we want B, which is the top quad extension, before activating C, which is the bottom top piston layer and storage. And because there is a timing priority that the top has to do something first before the bottom does something, so placing the inputs at the top would be a wise choice. And next, again, referring to A and B. So we need to do A during the closing and then B during the opening and then refire one such that both A and B power. So an interesting idea for you is that what if the input, the door inputs, let's just say, the door input also serves as a refire input? Because we're doing A and B second time, and this would be controlled by a refire input. And then the door inputs would control A during the closing, and then when the door input turns off, it will of course do B. So that really suggests us to do a lever input, and then it will also be accessible by a refire input. But then having this idea is nice, but you still have to worry about something, is that how do you differentiate between the door inputs and the refire inputs? Now, one way of doing it is to have a repeater input like this. So a repeater input obviously would fire both the top dust and the bottom dust, right? But then what the refire inputs would do is it would, for example, go like this. It would only fire the top dust instead of the bottom dust. Then we have a solution. So the top dust is responsible for, A and B and whatever. And while the bottom dust would be responsible for what the bottom powerings. And because the refire inputs does not touch on the bottom dust, then it's cool. It would work. So that's some tips for you for the inputs, and just to give you, I guess, a very standard solution is that many of the doors, they they rely on something like this. So this would be the input, and then there's a bus here that will connect to the sides and the bottom. So yeah, a lot of doors do something like this. So that you can consider. And you also notice that I already do a rising edge here, because that's the first thing that A does. But we will discuss a bit more later. Okay. So before we start to wire anything, let's consider the top first. We should properly name our inputs. So we're starting to create a sequence, basically. So this is how I will name them. So A, B, C, D for all the power lines. And this one, I would name it S for storage. So you can take a screenshot here, or you can just simply refer to the documents that I have for you. Yeah, I will just remove the signs, I guess. So just make sure that you remember them. So now let's consider capital A. So not the A here, that's small a. Capital A is talking about the top closing. So for the top closing, we want to, of course, post the storage. And then we would power the top two layers. So it would be something like this. And then, it does the top closing. So this means that capital A has the following moves. So let's just write down A. A would be S 102 game tick. And then we'll have A. There are two ways of doing this. I'll just write that down now. You can either do A, B with a pulse, or just constantly turn it on. So there are two ways of doing it. Now, I would prefer you to constantly power A and B. The reason is a bit subtle. I think I also said that before, but anyway, it's related to how the bottom might push up these blocks. And if the top doesn't block it, the bottom might push up. That basically the closing doesn't work. So in some sequences, we really need the top to block the bottom from pushing too much. So there are sequences that does that and relies the top to block it. Okay, so now we have considered capital A, so now we need to consider capital B, which is the top chord, basically, the opening and just retracting all along. What we need to do is, there are two ways of doing it regarding C this time. We can, just part C, and then one tick after we want to part D. So what it would do is basically it will pulse these and then automatically retract it. And then we would depower C, or you can just do a 1 tick or 2 game tick pulse. And then of course we pulse D. We would depower B. C will do a double pulse. We would depower A, or if you didn't turn on A or turn on B, then you just pulse it, and then we do a double pulse on B. So, conclusion for B, we have C. The two ways of doing that is either you turn on or just give it a 102 game tick pulse. And then we have D. It has to be a 102 game tick pulse, and it also has to power 102 game tick after C, basically. And then we would turn off C now. Or you can just do 102 game tick again. And then we have D. And then we can turn off B or we pulse it, depending on what you choose before. Then we do a double pulse on C. I write it as C2. And then we turn off A or we double pulse, not double pulse, or we pulse A. Again, depending on what you did before. And then we do B2 at last. So yeah, so that is B. And then I'll also include a small tangent, which is the extra moves. The extra moves really is just do your pulse on C. Then refire for A. Yeah, it's just basically that. It's nothing that much. Okay, so now let me give you some tips and tricks, I guess. So the first thing is, in this sequence, we already noticed that A always comes with B. Same here, A always comes with B, although this is B2, but then it doesn't really matter that much. So a very common circuit that controls A then B is a circuit like this. So we have a 3 tick here, 3 tick, 2 tick to here. Now, what this does is very nice. So if we just constantly power this line, it does the closing already. And then imagine we already did the quad, something like that. And then if we turn off this here, we do this. And then, of course, we need a C double pulse. And then if we simply just pulse this line. Oh, sorry. It should be a 2 tick. My bad. So if we just pulse this line here, you see that it actually does a double pulse here. So that's really nice. And that basically solves all of our problems for, you know, the A on, B on, B off, A off, B2 here. And an alternative way of doing this is this being 3, this being 4 and 3. So again, that also works. So again, turn off and then see when you pulse. So you see that also works very nicely. So yeah, so that is a very nice circuit, I guess. And also another thing is that if you power C and D fast enough, this line can actually allow this pulse here. So the B off or pulse, this line here, can actually be controlled by this line as well, given that you control C and D nicely. So yeah. Another thing that, another tips and tricks, I guess, is again, this time not on A and B, this time is on C and D. Again, C and D, it looks like it powers alternatively. Oh yeah, alternatively, just join C and D. And there's two main ways to join this. A very standard way is doing this, of course. And then, it can do this, and it will do this. So this needs a 4.5 tick pulse or a 9 game tick pulse. Like so. Another way of doing it is a bit wacky, but it still works. So yeah, both of these would work. And another tip is that for the quad retraction inputs, you can either take an output from D, or you can take an output from C even. But then if you wish to take an output from C, you should do that via a comparator. And also, given that you're not doing this variation, you're doing the one-tick repeater variation. So that also works. And then lastly, for the extra moves, so make sure that you leave space to pulse C, so you don't want to landlock yourself and make C inaccessible. And you also need to leave space to refire top circuit, basically. And the refire circuit is usually located at this position. It would go to the inputs that we have just discussed before. And I guess I can just build it back. So yeah. So that's that. So yeah, so these are all the tips and tricks for the top. And now I will go on to talk about the bottom. Okay, so I'm not going to name too much on these for this time, but then because there's not that many moves to know, so doesn't really matter. Okay, so for after the storage, after first storage, we need to do the top pistons, of course. So what we do is pretty simple. We just pulse this here, and it will do this. And then, of course, the storage will do its own thing. And make sure to time it correctly, of course. And now, after these moves, this is actually capital C. So capital C consists of the storage and just this move, basically. We want to do the triple extension after capital C. And allow me to introduce a small but useful input joint, which is this. So what it does is that we notice that powering the bottom will also power this here, and yeah, it will always be the case basically. So by doing this, the opening, it will do this, okay? And then for for the opening, if you want to retract it, all you need to do is just to do this, and then power this line again. So yeah. Now for the closing, let's just see what it would do. It would actually I should reset it like this, then do it like this, and then the closing, it would do this. So you see a very special phenomenon happen is that the opening actually push these pistons, but then the closing, it doesn't. Now, this is actually perfectly explainable using timings, and this is included in the first exercise. So you can try to explain why this happens, but I'm not going to go through the explanation here. But all you need to know is that this works. Now, of course, there's an inferior way of doing it, is to use a one-tick repeater here instead. But then it will basically lose the property of such. And so you see that it does power. And in this case, you really rely on the top blocking the bottom. But then with the two-tick, then all your problems are resolved. So yeah. Okay, so now for, just noticing some patterns. If you're clever, you're probably going to notice one pattern already. It's that, the move C and triple extension, it will do this here, of course. And then it would do this. So for the closing, it still does the same. Okay. And then for the opening, again, C, it will do this, And then the triple extension, it will do this, right? And then we need to do the triple retraction for the opening. So what it would do, it would do this, and then it will do this. So if you're clever, you already see one pattern, is that C and triple extension, we do this and this. Triple retraction, we do this and this. So yeah, you can basically just connect from here to here and then reuse it for all you want for the triple retraction. So yeah, just add a suitable toggle and it will work. And of course, you don't have to do a 4-state toggle here, although it looks like a 4-state toggle. Well, because both the opening and closing require C and TE, so you can simply just have a circuit that always powers this, and then you can simply have a 2-state toggle that would do this again with a suitable delay. So yeah. So that's all for the first pathway already. So yeah, if you don't wish to look at the second pathway, you can just skip to the exercise and the timestamps. But yeah, otherwise I will discuss the second pathway now. So yeah, and let's go on to the door operation planning for the second pathway. And before I do anything, so let me just copy the layouts from here to there. Okay. Now, to fully reuse our circuits and maximize circuit efficiency, we should probably let closing and opening do the same thing. Of course, in some cases we will need toggles, but then we still want most of the stuff to be the same. And hence we will look at some moves which are necessary for the closing and opening and apply such moves to the other operation. So yeah. Now the first thing is that during the closing, the top basically needs to do the first pistons, and then we will do the storage. Okay. The bottom, same thing. We also need to do the first piston first, then the storage. So that's the first thing that we notice. Okay. The second thing is that, well, we basically first take a look at the difference between the first and second pathway. That's the second pathway has storage on the ceiling and the floor level instead of one above or one below, respectively. So the difference is that let's just have these blocks to be placed at the center. The difference is that we basically can do, first retraction, do storage, and then same here for the bottom. First retraction, and then the storage. And then now we will have the triple. So the moral is basically the triple only needs to push one block down instead of two, as per the first pathway. And the consequence is that the top only, what the top does now is that it retracts the first blocks, and then it does the storage or whatever, and then it does the triple. So if you already notice, is that this is exactly the same as the closing. So for the first pistons, closing it does this, and then it does the storage, and then you can do triple. You can do that. And then the opening, we will also do the first pistons, then storage, then you can do the triple. So yeah. So yeah, we keep in mind this thing. So first pistons, storage, and then triple extension. Now, for the bottom, let's simulate the opening because it's a bit easier in my eyes, I guess. So what we want to do is, we try to reuse it. So, let's just suppose that we can also do first pistons and then storage. Okay. And then the top will push the blocks one block down. So it will be like this. So what is this? And then here, we can do basically the same thing. We do the first pistons, and then we do the storage. But then now we have to make sure that the storage is in a position that's ready to absorb the blocks, which for now we just take note of because there isn't much thing we can discuss for now. So we just take note of that. So the storage has to be ready for the second layer. So yeah. And of course, finally, we'll just do a double extender. Now, given that we are doing the first pistons and then storage, basically 2 times, it will be much more preferable if the storage is reusable. And we can just do top pistons and then the storage twice. And this is in fact possible, but then I'm not going to explain that now. I'll explain it a bit later in the sequencing section. Okay, so anyway, so back to, this position where we just left out with the double. After that, we just do a double to retract this. And now this is only considering the opening, but not the closing it. So, we can just test it out and see what the closing looks like and see if it works, basically. So the closing, it will look like this. And so let's suppose it does that. And then the bottom, what it would do is, of course, the first pistons. And then, storage. And then again, the first pistons. And then the storage. So far, so good. It still works. And then it will do a double extender. Now, you see a thing is that it actually pushes the top up. So basically, what we need to do is we need to wait until the bottom double extender finishes. Then we can do the necessary moves for the top to make sure the door closes properly. And I'll explain what the moves are a bit later. But what we know for sure now is that we either need a very long delay circuit at the top to wait for the bottom double extender, or we can just simply detect from the double piston extender and then just do a signal transmission to the top to do the final moves, basically. So yeah, and to record what we have basically developed, so again, we write down a quote-unquote sequence. So, and fortunately, it's actually quite simple for this layout. So what we do for both the closing and the opening is exactly the same. So we have A. A is the first layer moves for the top. TE stands for triple extension. This is for the top again. Then B is the final moves for the top. So both the closing and opening would do the same. And the bottom, C, C, D. So D means the first piston and then storage, and then D is just a double extender. So by doing this for both the closing and the opening, it will work. Okay. So that's how we would do our door operation. And of course, we want to convert from these operations to an actual sequence. So we need a powering layout. We need to know the inputs first. So let's just create that. Now let's just consider the top first. Because we need to power the first pistons for the first move of A. So what we do is we place a dust cross or dots here, and then with two solid blocks like this. And then this can basically just control this. Okay, so that's the first part done. And then the second part is we want to consider the triple extension because the lowest pistons are here. And how do we power it? Now, of course, we don't want to do some very silly moves like this just to push the blocks here to power it. It's too clumsy. What we can do instead, because we're in Java, we have QC, so you can just have a dust line and then with solid blocks, and this dust line will contribute to two levels of powering. One is the level at here, one is the level at here. via QC. So yeah, that's nice. And by noticing that this dust line does 2 layers of powering, we can also apply the concept one more time above here. And this dust line will also correspond to 2 layers of powering, one here, one here. And the only layer left is the top layer, which depending on a 4Y or 3Y design, there are different solutions. For a 4Y design, you can basically do the pieces like this, or you can use observers. But then I'll concentrate a bit more on the 3Y design because that's the place where people probably need the most help. So we can do observer sliders. Basically, you can do observer slider something like this as well if you really want to, but I don't really like it. I usually like this here, but then you cannot use a full observer slider, because if you use a full observer slider, you have this here that will break. So we don't want to do that. So we cannot have an observer here. Instead, we have piston here, another piston here. So it's a partial observer slider, but then this will left out this block where this piston extends. So what we want to do instead is we want to have a circuit like this. And of course, observer slider, you can also place it like this here if you really want to, but then I'll just do this, stick with this instead. So yeah, so these are the possible powering layouts that I've demonstrated for you. It's not really that variable because we have a lot less space now. So this will be our powering layout. And of course, another thing to notice is that when we fire the top, if we try to fire here, there's nothing to update it. So we need something to update it. And that's where we basically simply extend one block for this dust line and then have an updater piston here, such that now it will update it like this. So yeah. And we don't really do much powering layout for these. This is not quite helpful. Okay, so now let's consider for the bottom. For C, capital letter C, we need to have, basically we need to power these pistons, right? So just group them together, power them together, very nice, by using simple thing like this. Of course, you can do the other orientation as well, but I'll stick with this one for now. And then for the double extender, it's also very simple. For a 4Y design, then you can use a line of repeaters like this, and usually it's a bit more preferable if you set it on 4 ticks like this, so you can simply just input any pulse length and it will work. But then if you use other pulse lengths, then you are forced to input it with a 4-tick pulse, or convert yourself to gain ticks if you don't want to. But then I'll concentrate on the 3Y version, which simply is something like this. So the dust blocks, they all will contribute to the detection of observer. So that will work. And then all you need to do is simply have 4-tick repeater to input this dust. So so that's the powering layout. It's actually quite simple. It's not much. And of course, another thing to notice is that this can be flipped, I've already said, but then another thing that can be flipped is, between this and this. Also, you can also flip between this. Yeah, you can flip between this and this if you want to. So just flip it whenever you feel necessary. So yeah. So that's on the powering layout. And now it would be nice for us to determine the inputs. And the position of the inputs is important because where you place it determines your circuits, how your circuits are placed and powered. And there's also a reason why experienced Westerners, they sometimes determine the input position slightly later during the early stages of building. Of course, some extreme scenarios, they will place it at the very end, but then usually we'll place it early, but then not too early. That's all I can say. Now for pattern doors, this is actually usually much more intuitive and simple and straightforward. The reason being that there will most likely be cases where it's very apparent where you need to place it, either because some parts of the door is hard to access and you can really only place an input there for easier access and allow easier signal transmissions, or there's just some patterns where it's very it encourages you very much to place an input there because of convenience. But then for standard doors, we don't really have much patterns, so there's no indicators of patterns, and we basically have to do it a bit more carefully. Now we would consider the sequence of the door for the input position determination. At first, it doesn't really seem that there is much indication on where to place the input, but the top and the bottom looks pretty much okay. But then if you look carefully on the sequences ATB versus CCD, you actually see there is a timing dependency. Well, actually two, but then one of them is not that important. The timing dependency is that we need to do the triple extension before we can do the second C on the bottom. So this means that the top has a timing priority compared to the bottom. So we should place the inputs on the top first. Now, although B has to happen after D, but then this is not as important because it happens later. And also, as I've already said, you can just have a signal that comes from D and then just go back to B. So yeah, this is not that important. And what's more important is that we allow the triple extension to happen earlier such that we don't need more delay for the second C, which will otherwise occupy more space, because more delay usually correlates with more space usage. So yeah. Okay, so now that we decided that the input is on top, so what do? Well, because the first top move is to, just give a 1 to 2 gain take pulse to this dust here. So a very natural selection would be to, just basically have the input be a lever input, and then it would connect to a conductor detected by an observer, and it just directly powers this dust cross dot. Now, another thing to carefully consider is that whether you want it to be here or you want it to be on the other side. Obviously, you can move this slider piston. So, whether you want it to be on this side or on this side. Now, with careful consideration, this side is much better, because for this side, you see there's a double extender here, and it basically would occupy more space. And if you had the inputs be placed here, you basically obstruct some critical wiring space. So yeah, that's not what we want. So yeah. So we usually place it here. Okay, so that's all that has to be said for the inputs. Now I will consider the top sequence and also give you some wiring tips. And considering the top sequence, of course, we should name our inputs so we can get a clear procedure of what to do. So this will be our naming. So I would name this this slider as A, but then there are two inputs here. So I would name this as A out, so stands for A, and then it's just right. And then this is AL, A left basically. This would be B, this would be C. This is a bit more clumsy because there are a lot of different positions here, so I'll just name it like D, E, F, G, H, like so. So yeah, take a screenshot here if you need to, because I will delete the signs. Or you can simply just look at the documents that has already been provided. So yeah, you can just look at that and yeah, refer to the file. So yeah, because I need space to power the pistons basically. Okay. And also notice that we don't have to name this input already because we are not going to use this input and it's already connected by the input. So yeah, no need to consider that. Now, let's consider the first layer moves, which is basically capital A. So after the dust cross or dot one tick or two game tick poles, we want to fire storage. And here, let's employ the principle of minimum move sequence as taught in 2-12, Introduction to Planning and Sequencing. So during the closing for the storage DP, what we want is D. We don't want E because we want this piston to be here to be ready for the opening. So we want D instead of E. Okay. Now for this side, it's pretty intuitive. There's only one way of doing it. It's H, G, H pulsing. So yeah. And hence, I'll just write that here, so I guess why not. So the closing minimum move sequence, so the storage DP, we just do D, and then the double storage, we do H, G, H. Okay. So that's that. And now, of course, minimum move sequences can be different between the closing and opening. So, you know, let's just see. Also, it's concerned on A. Okay. Now for the opening, basically again this dust would pulse, and then we need to do the storage. So what we do now is that we do F, either we do a long pulse or just do a double pulse, and then D, and then E for the storage DP, because we need to push the blocks to here for this to retract. So yeah, and then for the double storage, we can wait for F, and then we can simply just do G and H. So what we have for A, opening minimum move sequence, is the DPE will do F, can do either 2 to 4 game to plus pulse, or we just do F2, and then we can do the E. And for the double storage, we do G, which has to happen after F, and then H. So yeah, so this is the closing and opening minimum move sequence. And now after developing the minimum move sequence, we can basically improve it. So let's first consider the double storage first. We can see that the difference between the closing and opening. So opening is G and H. Closing is HGH. So opening it just misses out one H, the first H. And we can add this move basically as a redundant move and just make sure that the first H is fired before F, assuming we do opening. So, let's just mark that down. HGH. Okay. Now, the next thing is on the DPE. So the opening DPE, storage DPE, there's not much flexibility, but then the closing there is a lot of flexibility, in fact. So it doesn't really matter if we just do the F and E's, as long as we just do a 1D, and that is already good enough. So we can just add, again, some redundant moves, the F and then the E. And as long as we do E, is fine. So hence, we have the improved sequence for the DPE. It will be F, then D, E, and then the double storage will do H, which is before F, and then we have G, which is after F, and H again. So this is the improved sequence for A. Okay. Now let's consider the triple extension, so TE basically. We would do AR, and now here there are two ways of doing this. One way is to so it's on B basically. The difference is on B. So either we pulse it or we give it a long pulse, essentially. So if we pulse it, then the result would be B, and then we will do C, but then it has to be 1 or 2 games after B, basically. Then we'll do B again, and then do C. The alternative, as I've already mentioned, is just give it a long pulse of B, and then C. Again, the timer has to be same, and then B turn off, and then do C. And then we would do AL. So nothing hard. So TE only needs AR, then B either on or pulse, C, which I write it like this. So C needs a 1 or 2 games to pulse, which happens 1 or 2 games after B. B will turn off or just pulse depending on what we chose. Then we do C again, and the pulsing is the same. It's like that. And then we do A, L. So yeah, So that's TE, the triple extension. And now finally, the final retraction. Now, the final retraction here, of course, for the opening, bottom doesn't really affect anything. So here we'll do B2, right? So B, we can propose B as B2. Okay. But then what about the closing? Does the closing work for this? Because, the bottom will basically like so. And then the entire stack just goes up to the position like this. And then does B2 work? Well, the answer is of course yes. Like so. So yeah, so indeed B2 works, and B, capital B, only consists of the roof B2. So yeah, so that's very nice. So we basically have considered all of A, TE, and B for the top. So yeah. Okay then, so that's basically the top sequence entirely figured out. And yeah, I'll just let you to wire the moves, but then of course I'll also give you some tips and tricks now. And of course, one major observation is that B and C power alternately. So what we can do is just join B and C. So there are two main solutions. One solution is the standard 4.5 tick plus solution. So you can see it works something like this. Okay, the other solution is a bit more wacky, being that it involves the rest of the map like this. So you can use these methods, I guess. So yeah. And then, of course, yes, after BC, we have AL. So you simply connect from B with sufficient delay. And now notice why I don't say connects from C with sufficient delay. Because later, we have B2. So if we connect C, then we basically most likely will block our input to B. So we usually connect from B to AL. So yeah, so that's that. Okay, so let's go on to the bottom sequence. Basically. And I guess one final point for top before I go is you should make sure that you leave space for future circuits. Because if you don't leave space, then you're probably going to rewire a lot of stuff, and that's not what you want. So yeah, and for example, where should you leave space? So for example, the final moves, as I already said, so don't connect from C to AL. There's a reason, because you block out B. So, and you should also leave space for the B2 or capital letter B. So yeah. Of course, there's some other scenarios as well. For example, when you wire the DP, you don't want to occupy too much space, such that just it's not durable. When you wire this double storage, you also don't want to occupy too much space, such that the triple extension is not wireable. So yeah, all of these considerations. So yeah. So yeah, so that's all I would remind you, I guess, for the top. And now we'll go on to the bottom, I guess. Let me just place blocks back down. And again, we are going to establish a sequence. So before establishing a sequence, we should name our inputs again, so that we have a clear procedure on what to do. So I would name it from here. A. It's very messy for this one, even messier than top. So because I view this as the front orientation, so I would name it kind of like reverse here, this orientation. So B, C, D, E, then F, G, H, I. So it's nothing special, just A to I. So yeah, now let's employ the principle of minimum move sequence again. So actually here there are many more solutions, valid solutions for the minimum move sequence due to the fact that the first layer and the second layer basically compensates between each other. So yeah, but then I'll show you basically one minimum move sequence, and I picked this minimum move sequence because it best illustrates on how you can improve the sequence. Or otherwise, if you have some other minimum move sequence, it's doable that you can improve the sequence, but it might be a bit harder for you to notice some patterns. So yeah. But yeah, either way. So again, make sure that you just take a screenshot if you need to, or you can just refer to the documents. And yeah, because I will basically just fire the piston, so I will just remove the signs. So yeah. Okay. So for the storage double piston extender, so you of course need to do A first during the closing. A storage DP. Two ways to do it. One way is to C and then E. Okay. And then for the quad storage, for the first layer, there are more than two ways now. And one way is to do F, and then G, and then F and H. It doesn't matter which powers first. And then G and I. Again, doesn't matter which powers first. Okay, so that's the first layer done. The second layer, we again do A. For the storage DP, this time we just need to do C. Okay. For the quad storage, we do F and H. Doesn't matter which powers first, and then we do G, and then we simply do F. Okay. So C, for C, the closing minimum move sequence. I wrote it in the document as a complete sequence, but then I would separate here for illustration. So I just write DPE. A, C, E, A, C. And then the quad is A, F, G, F and H, G and I, A, F and H, G, F. So yeah, so that is the minimum move sequence for the closing. And then during the opening, what we will do, of course, we do A first again. For the DP, this time we need to do much more moves. Again, now we do, again, there are two ways of doing this. It's just the first on this here. We do B, and then just 2 tier 4 tick 4 gain tick plus pulse for D, and then B, C, and then we do E. And then the quad storage, we just wait for D first, and we do G, and then F and H without timing constraints. And then we would choose here to do G and I, again without timing constraints. So yeah, so that. Then the top will push it down. So here now. So we do A again. The DPE, this time we don't need to do E now, we just do B and then D long, BC. And then here, here we would do H, okay, and then, well, H, there's no constraint, but then G has a constraint. G has to be done after the powering of D, and then we do F. So this is the minimum move sequence for the opening. So let me just write that down. C, opening minimum move sequence, DPE, it is B, D, B, C, E, B, D, oh, my bad, should have an A first, don't have enough space now. A, B, D, B, C, E, and then A, B, D, B, C. Okay. Quite long. And quad. We have for the quad A, G, after D. And then we have F and H, G and I, A, H. Actually, A and H, it doesn't really matter, but whatever. G, after D, then do F. Yeah, so these are the minimum move sequence for the closing opening for the DP and the quad, respectively. Now, to improve the sequence, we first look at the quad storage first, I guess. So compare between the closing and the opening. So what do you see? Well, you will see that basically the opening minimum move sequence misses some Fs. So if I don't consider any timing constraints after D or whatever, then closing minimum move sequence, you know, is A, F, G, F, and H, G and I, or I can write it upwards, G and I, A, F and H, G, F. Okay. But then what about the opening? Opening, it looks like A, G, F and H, G and I, A, H, G, F. Right? So the upper one is the closing, the lower one is the opening. So you would see that there's some F's missing. So the first F missing is this F. The second F missing is this F. Right? So it would be an interesting idea if we simply just add some F's. You know, it works. It will work. Given that we have the F's fired before D. And then we would yield something like A, F, G, F and H, G and I, A, F and H, G, F. Right? Yeah. So by having this, the quad storage is now fully reusable. And yeah, the sequence looks like that. But then we can actually do better for the quad storage. The way we do it is might be not that thinkable, but it isn't that bad. We place an immovable block here first, because we are now going to modify H, basically. Because we don't, how do I say it? Because we always have something like F and H, but then sometimes we have F. And if we want to eliminate the 4-state toggle needed for H, then, you know, we can just add H along with F, just power them simultaneously, because why not? They're close enough already. Might as well just power them simultaneously, right? So by adding this immovable block, we are now safe to do F and H always. And it would, you know, let's just rewrite it as A, F and H, G, F and H, G and I, A, F and H, G, F and H. And just to demonstrate it, A. So the obsidian is useful here because we don't want to power H before, but then now we can safely do that without issues. So F and H, G, F and H, and then G and I. Okay. We do A again. So F and H, G, F and H. Okay. And then now for the opening, do A. So again, F and H. So F is powered before D, so now D would go here. G only doesn't have I, and then we do F and H again, and then now we have I, so G and I. Then we do A again, so F and H, G, and then we do F and H again, and then there's a block here already. So it's nice. So F and H, it will do this. So yeah. And yeah, that works. And by having this immovable block here, we can safely allow H to always power with F. So yeah, so in the end we get A, F and H, G, F and H, G and I, A, F and H, G, F and H. So yeah, that's nice. But then still there is something that is not nice enough. Now, the thing is, F and H always come with G. F and H always come with G. F and H always come with G. F and H comes with, oh, no G's. Whoops. So we need a 4-state toggle for G. It's not that nice, you know. But then, there's a fortunate news for you. There's a neat trick that can eliminate this toggle for G as well. It's relying on timing, so I will demonstrate that later. And we can safely assume that G always happens after F and H. So what would this lead us to? This would lead us to a more improved sequence, which is A, F and H, G, F and H, G and I, and A, F and H, G, F and H, G. The only difference is that every 4 Gs there's 1 I for the second iteration. So this I, unfortunately, is not avoidable. You do really need a 4-state toggle, basically. And now, a tip for you is that 4-state toggles, well, 4-state toggles are already better than 3-state toggles, to be honest, but then 4-state toggles can sometimes be annoying. But the key thing to notice is that you don't necessarily need 2 standard toggles to make a 4-state toggle. And yeah, I'll also provide you an exercise for you, which is PF3 for those who attempt this pathway. So basically an exercise for you to construct a 4-state toggle in an uncommon way, basically. So not using 2 standard toggles, and instead it's going to use some other things. It shouldn't be that hard. But yeah, so just a helping hand for those of you who wish to do this pathway. So yeah, okay, so now we have considered the quad, and its ultimate improved sequence is it looks like this. So it's nice. Now we consider the storage DPE. If we simply look at the closing minimum move sequence and the opening minimum move sequence, of course, we don't really find anything in common too much, to be honest. But then the thing is, we can actually apply the opening sequence to the closing sequence with some modifications. And what is the modification, you might ask? Well, the opening will always grab the block using C. But then the closing, we just want to leave the block out, right? So we don't do C. We just eliminate C in closing. We only have C in the opening, no C's in the closing. So the DPE without C is effectively an SPE. And yeah, and this is how we can develop the improved sequence for the DPE. So hang on. I just want to, have a side by side so I can just read it off from here. CIS DPE A B D take 4 game tick plus B C, which is open only. And then E. Okay. Need more signs, that's fine. Then we have again A, B, D. 2 tick 4 plus. B, C, open only. And then we will also have the quad already figured out. A, F, and H, G, F, and H, G, and I, A, F, and H, G, F, and H. So yeah, the improved sequence for C, it looks like this, and then now we can remove all of these. Yeah. So now you really see that by applying suitable toggles, either 2-state or 4-state toggles, C is completely reusable. And the improved sequence, I already wrote that down for you. And of course, you can refer to the document if you want. So yeah, so very nice. Now, of course, we don't really need to develop any sequence for D because it really it's just for ticking this, you know. Okay, so now let me just introduce some tips and tricks for you. So now we previously discussed that F and H can go simultaneously and G afterwards. So what is nice for us is to create an input for F and H, like so. And then, you know, and then we induce a 2-tick or 4-game-tick delay from F to G. And why is this important? The timing is important. So why is the timing important? Let me just demonstrate here. It should be quite intuitive for some of you who have worked with storage a lot. Essentially, if you haven't seen the reason why, it's because on this move, for example, if we do F without H, yes. If we do F, you see G doesn't power, even though it's supposed to be powered, you know. So yeah, so this is a very nice timing that makes G basically disabled during the last move. And I think I forgot to write down the last move. Hang on. There we go. So yeah, so it prevents the last H from breaking the door during the opening. You know, because F, the block retracting, is still immovable by the time G is paused. So now, the next thing I'm going to give you the trick is actually just a list. Let me just summarize all the toggles that you need, so you know you have a better preparation on what you're expecting to. So we need a toggle for C, this here, which allows the opening to pause. only the opening to post, but not the closing. We need a 4-state toggle for I. This is I from one of F, G, or H. So you can leech off from either F, G, or H, and then we need a 4-state toggle for I. Okay. We also need a toggle for the refire of C, basically. So the sequence here basically yeah, I repeated twice the C's, but yeah, anyway, so you get the idea. So we need a toggle for the refire of C. And we also need a toggle from C to D. Now, the toggle from capital C to capital D it may be a 4-state toggle, let me just warn you. And again, 4-state toggles, exercise PF.3 will help you. So yeah. And at last, 2 miscellaneous pointers and we're done. So first, creating a toggle can involve moving the desired component out. So what do I mean? So for example, you have a standard toggle. So so basically a 2-state toggle, I should say. So, you know, normally you can have something like this, correct? But what if this is not possible? Let's just say. What if you are only having this? You know, well, what you can do is that you can toggle by moving this piston out. You know, you can do that. So yeah, for example, something like this. So, you know, you can do this. Yeah. That is a 2-state toggle. Very nice. Yeah, you can do that, for example, just saying. And that might be helpful for some of your toggles, hopefully. And secondly, make sure, again, to reserve space for final moves on top. So what I mean is that, because after D, we need to do B. So yeah, just make sure that you reserve space for the final moves on top and find solutions to connect to the side pistons, because we haven't really talked about side pistons, but then you still have to connect them. It is part of the task. So, you know, just make sure that you're able to connect them. So yeah. So yeah, that basically wraps up on my guide on the 5x5 piston door. And a very general advice is that you have to make sure that what moves you need to wire up before you start to wire. So that's the reason why I give you sequences. And you have to plan your wiring space accordingly. Now, of course, the 5x5 piston door is still a big challenge for many. So, you know, in case you just get stuck on some circuits, just feel free to drop me a message on my Discord DMs. So, my account name is just the same as my Minecraft IGN. So, you know, my YouTube channel name. So, yeah. So just make sure to send me, you know, relevant media files, so screenshots, a word download, or schematic files, and state your problem clearly, so you know I can provide you some advice or tips. Because if you don't send me sufficient files, then I cannot help you, basically. So, and in addition, yeah, because I will respond to you, so make sure you really are accepting direct messages on Discord. So don't just send a message to you, and then when I try to message you, and then Discord says, "Oh, you're not allowed to message to this person because you're not on the friends list." So yeah, you know, so just make sure that you are able to receive direct messages from me. So yeah, either make me as a friend or yeah, just enable Discord messages from strangers, I guess. So yeah, and yeah, good luck with your build, I guess. So let me just talk a bit more on the exercises this time. So the first exercise, I already said it in the first pathway, is just asking you to explain why the closing, the piston here doesn't fire, but then the opening it does fire, due to this 2 tick here. So yeah, try to explain it from timings. And then the second exercise is that let's just suppose that we attempt of 2 5x5, because you can, in here. So just asking you some questions on the powering layouts and any modifications of the sequence on the top. So yeah. And then the third one is for those who attempt the second pathway, it will be important for you create a 4-state toggle just in this space. And then the fourth exercise is just asking you to complete your 5x5. So yeah. And also note that I probably won't be providing a solution at the back for this exercise. So yeah, just to not spoil anything. So yeah, and then the fifth exercise is preparing you for the achievement assessment, so 2-F, because one of the questions is related to here. So, suppose we attempt a 6x6 seamless piston door. So I want you to first create a piston layout, then we create a powering layout with, for the top only, actually. And then I don't require you to create a powering layout for the bottom, but instead I give you this circuit here, which is a piston tape, and I want you to verbally explain to me why piston tapes are useful. Are there any alternatives as replacement of piston tape for the powering layout for the bottom, and then also explain why piston tape is superior. So yeah, so these are all the exercise. Hopefully it's not that hard, I guess, because if you think these are hard, then the achievement assessment will probably be too much for you. But yeah, either way, in case you find it hard, just feel free to ask help from me. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to share with you in this video, and thank you very much for watching and support throughout the entire series. And yeah, again, just the casual stuff, or the world download, documents, and so on and so forth. These kind of stuff are already in the description, and some other information that people might find useful, they are also always in the description already. So, you can just refer to them if you need to. And yeah, I thank you very much for watching this very long guide video, and hopefully you are successful in creating a 5x5 piston door, and I will see you in the next video.